You'll find inside your bulletin somewhere something that looks like this. You don't need it now. Later today, if you feel like revisiting some of these ideas, or if you don't know these stories very well, they're all listed on that piece of paper. We're going to cover Matthew 24 and 25, and most of you know all of these stories already, so we are not going to labor through them. We're going to talk mostly about the points of them and not go over each one. And we certainly have had people up here go through line by line and spend 45 minutes on 4 lines. So I'm just going to rip through 2 chapters in one setting and see how that goes. If you get kind of lost, I hope you're still going to be happy with what you hear, and then you can study this. If you already know this stuff, there are stuff here for you to do this afternoon. If you want to go a little deeper, there's stuff on here for you as well. You just have a little less reading to do. I want to first begin by telling you a story that happened in my former life. Riding around on a fire truck was not something I always did. Firefighters work almost every 4th of July because all of you like to play with fire on the 4th of July and make our job harder. And one of those years, I was also on the arson bomb team, and I found myself on a sheriff rescue enforcement boat in the middle of the Colorado River. And we were looking for drunk drivers in boats. We were looking for people in trouble and doing some rescues. And we were in the part of the Colorado River that's called Lake Havasu, where they put a dam up, and it gets big and wide, and all sorts of people fill Lake Havasu on 4th of July weekend, and they make these little islands of boats, 5 to 10 boats. They lash them together, and they make this kind of a floating island, and they have a good time together. They're all just laughing and eating and drinking together on these little boats. But you can't really go across the lake that day. Like, I know our skiers here would just be twitching because there's this huge lake, and there's no place you can go full speed because it's full of these islands of groups of boats. And we were winding our way through. And the great news when you get assigned, it sounds like a good job. It's 115 degrees. You get to wear dark blue clothing, and you're not allowed to go in the water. So it's an awesome assignment. And you get to visit people who are trying to have a good time and escort some of those people over to Arizona to put them in jail. Because on the California side, we don't have a jail on our side of the river. We just give them all the naughty people, and then we drive them on the boat over to Arizona to put the naughty people in jail. So, obviously, it's great fun. Great fun. And we were out there patrolling, and way off, pretty far in the distance, we saw this houseboat. And there are lots of houseboats out there. It's not like it's the only one. But this one caught our attention. And you couldn't really make it out right away, but houseboats tend to just be like little tanks in the water. They just sort of trudge over here and trudge over there. They're not like nimble speedboats. Some of you, I think, who's been on a houseboat and stayed? We've had some of our folks do that, right? So it's like a home on the water, a little apartment. Sometimes you get a slide with it or something, but you don't really pull skiers behind it. This one, though, is rocking back and forth. Back and forth. And you can kind of see, and it seems weird because it's not like it has its own special storm over there. But it's rocking back and forth because everybody has decided to get up on the roof and run from one side to the other to see what might happen. And that brings us to one, I have to teach you something today, is to talk about in Matthew 24, we think about this when we talk about it, that this is verses on the Great Tribulation. And most of you, if I asked you what you thought tribulation meant, the word that comes to most of our minds is trouble, the great trouble. And we've had a lot of people try to tell us when the great trouble might happen, what it seems like, how we can notice it. But I would submit to you in this story of mine that the great trouble isn't going to be noticed if you don't occasionally look around for it and see where it is. If you're living your life with your head down, only focused on you and your things, you won't notice the great trouble. And so for my part, to talk about Matthew 24, which we're burning right through all of it, but the last few verses right now, is that we don't know when it's going to happen, but when we saw that boat rocking back and forth, we saw trouble happening. Now, that Greek word in your Bible will often be translated into words like trouble, affliction, or distress. When you find that Greek word in your Bibles, there's a handful of verses, and they call it affliction or distress. But what the word actually means, literally, if you looked it up in the dictionary, the word means pressure. Literal or figurative, and by the way, the word literally also means figuratively now. It didn't used to, so I don't know why I said both those words, but I know Mrs. Caruso wants me to stick to the old ways. That it's pressure. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what pressure is like and how we might respond to pressure. Because while Matthew 24 is a discussion about a big pressure event on the whole world, there is tribulation happening today in all sorts of places, from the people that come here on Mondays to what's happening halfway around the world. And because we, in our boat, was looking for it, we were passing all of these other islands of boats of people who didn't notice anything at all. Now, they were eating and drinking, but they weren't giving into marriage. But they didn't notice the trouble at all. And we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But a big, stable houseboat tipping and turning seemed like a really bad idea. And nobody in Dave's part of the fire department told me to watch out for tippy, wobbly houseboats. We didn't get any training on this, but it didn't look good to us. And we were trying to speed over there, but we couldn't go there quickly. We couldn't go there fast because there were all these clusters of islands of happy little parties going on, and we're having to weave around and go around the long way and come back this way. And that brings to me another verse that I've read in Daniel where people are complaining about why sometimes God is delayed. And he says that he was delayed, Michael the prince was delayed for 21 days. Sometimes when you're in trouble, like when you dial 911, help is on the way. But if you've dialed 911 and are waiting for that help to come, it feels like forever. And the firefighters are getting out of whatever they're doing and into the fire truck and rolling to your house in less than a minute. That's the standard. Even while the dispatcher is talking to you, they're already dispatching the fire truck while they're getting more information. And yet if you're waiting while you're under pressure, it seems like it's going to go forever, even as everybody is rushing to help you. Nonetheless, those scamps on top of the roof of that rocking boat, they were getting it to rock farther and farther still, all the way. And then a couple people fell into the water, and they kept doing it. The rest of them thought that was hilarious, and they kept going. And now, no offense, girls, but some girls started to scream at each dip. And I dare say it could have been some boys, because typically if you're a boy scream, they usually sound like girls too. And then when we got fairly close, the whole thing quickly flipped completely over upside down, and everybody was suddenly going swimming whether they wanted to or not. And I would tell, some of you have ridden with me when I've driven a boat. And if you rode with me, you'd be wearing your life jackets. None of these people had their life jackets on. And so now we just have a sea of really scared and panicky people yelling because they're going to die. They can't touch the bottom of the pool. And they're thrashing about. And we weren't quite there yet. We were still trying to get there, but we weren't quite there. There were other people closer in their boats. And some of the people still didn't notice. They were still goofing around and playing around and having a good time, and they didn't even notice the screaming. I don't even know how that was possible. And then there were boats of people that noticed and didn't go to help. And if you do boating, and especially if you're out in the ocean, everyone out on the ocean working on a boat is both a rescue person and a firefighter. There's no, if you're on a big commercial boat working, if you go on a cruise, like the waiter that's bringing you food is also a firefighter. There's no like, that's not my job there. And quite frankly, to push Dave's point today, this church is like that as well. We need all of you not to just be riding. We need each of you to find a place where you're not just watching, that you're able to lend a hand and be part of the rest of this. Because there's not enough folks to be the team of people that only do the stuff and the rest of you come and watch. This isn't that kind of a place. There's way more stuff to do than there are people that we can do it, and we can't afford to pay them all to do it. And so that's to support what Dave's asking you to do with these surveys. There's a place for you. It won't have to be up front and do what I'm doing. We're not saying that. Maybe that is your place. But if you're terrified of that, we're not going to make you do stuff that you can't do. That's why I want you to look at the list of what you might be able to help with. But some of those people did notice the boat fall over. They noticed the bodies in the water, and they did nothing. They watched. You've seen that, right? In car accidents, maybe. Some people come over to watch. We put up fire barricades, and people go around them so they can watch. Not help, but watch. And then there were a handful of people there that just had a boat and their friends, and they decided to do the one thing they thought they should do, which was help people get out of the water. Do you see what I mean? They didn't know how to do lifeguard swimming. They hadn't been through the, lifeguard class because there's real training there to do it well. But they were willing to just do what they could and help somebody get out of the water and just reach out and lend a hand and help somebody. And then we arrived. I'm going to leave that story for a moment and talk a little bit about what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 25, the end of 24 and 25. When Matthew tells us about Jesus, he covers some preliminary details in the first part of the book, and then he has 3 chapters on the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is introducing the ideas of what it is to be a follower of God and what those people might look like. In Matthew 24 and 25, this is just before Jesus is going to be arrested. And he will have some more comments, but this is his last big discussion with people about what's going to happen after he leaves and what role we might participate in that. And he starts identifying some groups telling stories to them that they can identify with. And I think the story that I'm telling you, you'll be able to see a little bit about what Jesus is talking about. And what happened to this real life story for me, you'll find maybe you're in some of this. And I'm not going to point anybody out or accuse them of anything, but I think I can find myself in some of those seats and some of those stories at times. And sometimes that makes us a little uncomfortable. Those folks in those little groups, while they were getting along with their families and having their adventures, the way we define those groups here is that those groups are built on the idea that we're going to do connection, and we believe in that connection should be happening. But that isn't the only purpose of the circle that you're in, no matter what its size. Your circle also has a worship component and a service component. So even though there's nothing wrong with you gathering and having life and enjoying it more abundantly, in the first discussion about these foolish and faithful servants is about us still being true to our purpose no matter what we're doing and where we're doing it. Jesus is calling us to be true to our purpose. And so when I'm talking to you kids, your purpose is to get your school done and keep your rooms clean and help out around the house. And don't give a goofy look when somebody asks you to wash the dishes, because you live there and you eat there. And when I talk to the husbands that work and their wives are just at home, languishing in the castle, enjoying lives surrounded by 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 5-year-olds, the peaceful, happy life of child raising, and you come home from your terrible, dreary jobs and just want to be king of the castle. Why are only the girls giggling? You can't turn into a giant teenager and not find a place to help about the house. Whatever our role is, however we are together, we need to be people that are about ourselves, about making the group better, finding a place. We can't sometimes find people to carry trash bags to the dumpsters. All of us can play a part in the circles that we're in to help those circles to give relief one to another, to be faithful to each other, and to not be trying to have everyone serve us. Sandy loves to be the queen of my life, but she also got a prince to watch after. I'm going to get into trouble if she's not minding me. Then the next group we talk about in the next part of Matthew 25 is about these girls who have lamps filled and they're ready to go, and lamps that aren't filled when it's time to go. And that story is about being equipped. That the time that you have when nothing is happening is time spent building up your skills or your equipment or your training. Jesus is calling us that if we don't have something to be doing, that we can learn something else to do. We were talking in the back about me speaking up front. This is not my gift. This is something I was trained to do. This isn't something I was always doing and loved to do. I was taught to do this. And so there is a place for you to take your gifts and apply those. But in this story here, Jesus is telling us that if you don't have some of these skills, you can take time to learn to do something you don't know how to do. And a lot of us, once we clear education, we decide, I'm stopped learning, school is hard. And I would tell you that lifelong learning is something you should be endeavoring to do. That you should be trying to, I've learned all sorts of things I didn't think I could learn to do. I've learned to draw, and I don't draw at all as well as most of the people here. But I did learn to draw better than I did before. That isn't to say that anyone's going to call me an artist by any stretch, because I'm miles from that. But I did learn to see the world differently. I did learn to see shapes and colors differently. And I learned to do more than stick figures. And so if there's something in your future that you might need to learn, go learn to do that. Get more skills and ability. Because the story of the foolish virgins is about people that when they had idle time, they spent their time filling their lamps with oil, and others did not. And then when they were pressed in to service, because they didn't know they were going to be pressed into service, they were ready anyway. And I think a lot of us wait until we have to know, like, well, I'll do that when I know I'm going to get to do this, then I'll learn this. And when I was an early young firefighter, and they were only teaching us to do firefighter things, I decided to also learn to do driving things. In a lot of fire departments, you don't do the driving things at first. You're not allowed to touch the steering wheel. It's only for the next guy up above you. But I decided I want to learn that too, and I learned to drive this thing called a split shift rear axle. And that's only to say it makes shifting a stick shift even more complicated than driving a stick shift. And then it never really came up. I learned to do it. It's a really old fire truck, got put away. I didn't. 15 years later, when all of Southern California was on fire in 2003, they were pulling out fire trucks that had been parked in an open field for years and loading them with stuff and calling them fire trucks and putting us out on them. And they said, does anybody know how to drive a split shift rear axle 1969? And I said, yeah, I do. So I learned it like 15 years before, not knowing the purpose that I might need it. And now everything's like no stick shifts practically. But learning to drive a stick shift isn't a bad skill just to have, because you just don't know when that might happen. And so I would submit that Jesus telling us in this story about the lamps is telling us to do when we have the time, to choose to learn to do more and equip ourselves to be available in case somebody calls. We were on a school field trip and somebody tweaked their ankle really, really bad. You know I have a splint and a first aid kit in my car, even though I didn't use it for like 15 or 20 years. But it's in there, and we used it that day. And then the third story that Jesus talks about in Matthew 25 is about what you're going to do with your talent. And that, I think, is more about the things that are gifts to you. Things that you already love to do, and you can get better at them. Like Gary finding out, I'd like to do ping pong better. But he has this skill a bit, a sporting skill already. So it's not so much about training, but you have things that you just know how to do. We have people in this church that just like to serve, and they just look for places that can happen. And then we have us finding here that we just come here because this is our one day a week of vacation. But Jesus is telling us in the story about the talents that the things you have that you can already do, that you already love to do and that you like to do, there's a place for you to do that to help others. To help others do well and be better. And you should be looking for ways that you can apply that. You shouldn't be holding that inside. We find that once in a while. It happens here with music. Like we have the regular people over and over, and then all of a sudden somebody hears somebody out there and they go, hey, You should be singing up here. And they come up and they're wonderful. They're just leading out there. Because I'm with Dave. I sort of hide under the other voices and try to find my way near it. There it is. I ride beside another voice. I'm not going to lead the melody. If I'm surrounded by the right note, there's a sporting chance that I'll find it, or I'm going to pretend I'm harmonizing when I don't. And those of you that sing well know that it isn't harmony if you miss it by a little. But there's a place for you to apply those talents that you can do. And that's what we're talking about in this rescue story, is that if you have a boat and there's people in the water, you can just reach your arm out and start pulling people in. There's a place for that. So now we come up to these group of people and let me pause before I go there, but let me say one more thing. If you find yourself struggling with these things that I'm telling you from these stories, and you find it hard that you know you should and you aren't, you feel guilty about it, you come and you think, well, I should or I ought to or I whatever. The solution to your problem is not rehearing the sermon over and over and over until you do it. It is you finding in the intimate space that you and God alone live in, spend your time there. If there's anything about you that you wish was different, whether it's here or anything else, the solution to that is you getting more time with Jesus. That's where the solution is. It isn't you trying harder. It isn't you just grudgingly going forward. It's you being connected. Because the more you get connected, that Jesus can move in, that you can feel Jesus connecting with you, then these things follow from that. It's like in that last song that we heard. You are singing and you're hearing people sing, Lord, have your way with me. These behaviors that I'm pointing out that are valuable are because people chose to let the Lord have his way in me and you. So we're not asking you to try harder. We're inviting you to know God better, because God is the one that wants to encourage you to get more skills and ability. God wants to help you see, as you live life abundantly, that there may be something happening around you where pressure is happening. That God wants to put in you the talents that he's already given you. He wants to use those to things that you can't see and can't notice, so that when the boat's rocking off in the far distance, you can notice that. And you can start going toward the trouble. That only happens by you spending a little more time with Jesus yourself. It happens in the smallest space, what we call the intimate space. It can't happen by you faithfully coming here every week. You can get some improvement here. But the deep, long improvements, you become like what you're with. The people that you pick, for sure. But you also become like the God you see. And these things that Jesus is talking about is because you get connected to who Jesus is. Because this is how Jesus sees us and the world. So the last little bit I want to share with you now, if it comes to you and you have to pick to help, when we finally got there, where there's all these people in the water, and everyone that's screaming, and everyone that's flailing about, and everyone that's splashing. The reality is, those people don't need to be rescued. They want to be rescued. They're demanding to be rescued. But they're nowhere near under pressure. The people I had to find, and a couple other of the rescue guys on the boat, we are looking for the quiet person. When you're drowning and you're barely above water and you're spending more time under the water than above it, and you're just trying to grab a little bit of air to survive as you slip under, and you're just fighting to come to the top, but you can't quite come to the top, and you just get your mouth open enough, the only thing you're going to do is just try to get a fast breath and a lot of water at the same time. And those people aren't making any noise. They're doing the last thing they're about to do, which is eventually going to swallow more water and no air. And then it'll be too late. And so the people I'm going to go for and go towards are the people that are quiet. And in your life, you want to look for that in the groups that you're watching when you're doing something. Yesterday, the kids were at the bowling alley doing introductions and meeting new kids, and they're at the bowling alley. I'm looking there for a few people that seem to be in the margins. They're being overlooked. They're not in a group. They're not connected. Those are the people that I'm trying to nudge help toward, because they're in the edges and being forgotten and lost. Not everybody in the middle that's having a good time, but that one person that's off to the side, in the group, not with the group. Those are the people that I'm looking for and sending help towards. And so I submit to you, when you're going to actively choose to reach out and rescue, and you have a lot of demands for your time, you want to look where the silence is. And that's the piece that Dave was talking about here, is we have a silence in the children's division of the Sabbath school. Some of the classes can't do teaching because there's no one to teach it. And that's where we need someone to hear where teaching isn't happening and ask if they could help make noise in that quiet place. Because in the margins, where it's not popular, where the real rescues need to be. The last bit of this, Jesus says in this last story, he says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I'm not just talking about people who don't have McDonald's. There are people that are hungry for all sorts of things. Hungry for friends, hungry for support, hungry for someone who's just not busting all the time. I think as a teenager, that's the thing you don't love about the help you're often given. Most of the help that you're often given as a teenager is lots of correction coming from a loud voice. And you're not looking for that kind of help. You're looking for somebody who says, I trust you. But if it was me, I might try this. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. Jesus is saying, he's talking about people who entertained strangers and aliens and people they didn't know, not their friends, not their family, outside their comfort circle. And I was a stranger and you took me in. That you're looking for folks and people that don't have a circle to be in. And you're inviting them in to that circle. I was naked and you clothed me. And I would mention to you, if you're naked, are you going to stand out much? Or are you likely hiding somewhere to be unseen? Those are people that we should be looking for. The people that are naked in whatever it is, that are being pushed out and being isolated and being stripped down. We heard in the prayer about people that are sick, and you visited me. But some of the some of sickness, it's easy to do. Cassie broke her arm. We just take her for a cast. But some people who have broken brains, they're hard to visit. How they see the world and what they want to do is difficult. And we definitely have people that reach out on Mondays and Tuesdays, folks like that. But there might be a place for you there. And people that are in prison and you came to me. And I would submit to you that we're not just talking about locked up jail prison, but we're talking about people that are imprisoned by addictions and by demands that they can't avoid. Some people are prisoners of incredible financial pressure. There's so many jobs here where you think you make enough money to make it, and after they get done whittling all the stuff away and everything else that happens, there's just 2 month at the end of your money. And we have this idea that we put people in prison so we don't have to see them, that we can put them over there. And it's true. Many of them don't belong with us in here, maybe, right? For safety's sake, they belong where they're being. But that doesn't mean we aren't reaching to them and trying to nurture to them. And so when we have people that maybe it's even too difficult that they aren't coming here. They're not locked up, but they're not coming here. We still have to be trying to find ways we can reach to them and be reaching out to them and to let them know how much they are loved. And Jesus is here as the King saying, insomuch as you did this to one of them, you're doing this to me. And all of these things that we're talking about is about Jesus living in you. And whatever you're doing that is good and healthy is happening because of Jesus in you. He's going to enable you to say, I don't mind carrying the trash out. It's not a thing. I can do that. We had a while back over here, Mrs. Caruso doesn't allow coffee. And over here we had someone spill coffee. It was very traumatic. And I just getting paper towels, we're going to be fine. And then she asked later if it was okay, and I said, yes, I just poured coffee in all the pews, and it matches. Don't worry. It's okay. You can just go out and do something else. If you're worried about how you look or what someone might think of you, you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking at yourself. And the answer in all of this is for you to get connected to Jesus, because he will fill you, encourage you, and help you, that you will notice when there's pressure out there. And I'll tell you, my life is this. I know I'm in the right place the more uncomfortable I am. I'm getting close to where I'm supposed to be. I'm not very comfortable with that, by the way, but I do know that that is exactly the right place. And I would invite all of you to get a little more uncomfortable, which is why I'm going to talk for 3 more hours.